I quote Bill Wilson in the forward to the 12 or 12, where he says, AA's 12 steps are a group of principles, spiritual in nature, which, if practiced as a way of life, can expel the obsession to drink and allow the sufferer to become happily, usefully whole. That's what a 12-step program is.
Right.
We engage in a process of self-searching, leveling of pride, and confession of shortcomings designed to bring about the conscious realization of the presence of God in our lives. Now, I was sitting there thinking, my introduction to Alcoholics Anonymous happened on March 1st, 1982, when I checked into my first psychiatric institution. And everything I just said meant nothing to me then. And so, and I know that a lot of you folks are new here, and so you came in the door probably pretty much like I did, driven here by circumstance and not virtue, not seeking God at all. I certainly wasn't seeking God. I was backing out of hell. And I wasn't sure I wanted to leave hell. I just kind of wanted to moderate the effects. I was looking for the cut way back group rather than actual stopping drinking and drugging. I mean, that seemed kind of radical. That's pretty extreme, isn't it? Life on the real, on the naked. But so I don't know what you're hearing when what we're talking about here, and I know that for me, the steps didn't make really any sense at all. Looking at them from the bottom, from step one, and I was still full of arrogance, and so my mind was very closed. And I remember they gave me I received my first $30,000 big book. If you go to a treatment center, they charge you $1,000 a day, and they give you a big book, which is just really, really generous of them. I can sell you one at the Up Street Club for $11. But in any event, they gave me this book, and I read it because I didn't have much else to do. And as the Thorazine wore off and the drugs they were giving me to detox me wore off, I began to read this thing, and I thought it was written in Chinese. So all this stuff about spiritual principles and working out our solution on the spiritual and altruistic level just went right on by me. I remember telling an old-timer years ago, hell, I don't even believe in God. And he said, that's okay, kid, you'll get over it. And he was right, I did. I got over it. There better be a God or I'm lost. I'm really, really lost. And so, unwillingly and grudgingly, I kept being led back into this 12-step program until finally it began to work on me. How it works, the it that talks about, I think, is God. That if I will take these steps and engage in this painful and seemingly ridiculous process of taking my own inventory and then going around and telling a bunch of people I don't really like all about it, and then going to people I really despise and telling them, well, it was really my fault, and I shouldn't have done that to you, you son of a bitch. Oh, no. And I promise I won't do it again. And by the way, here's the check for all the money I stole from you. I didn't seem at all appealing to me at the time. And yet somehow, because of desperation, I kept coming back. I've been in 6 psychiatric institutions in 33 years. I've been sober. That was March of 82. I've been sober since November 17, 1999. So that 17-and-a-half-year period, I consider the time that I was negotiating the terms of my surrender to an all-powerful God. And there are no terms of surrender to God. Either God is everything or God is nothing. And the surrender is either absolute or I'm just still going kicking and screaming down the road of life. And so it took a lot of strange and twisted stories for me to get to the place where there was a heartfelt surrender, and it happened right at the end of 1999. And life has been completely different for me since I came back into the program in March of 2000, with about 90 days sober, and started all over again and began to realize what this was really all about. But see, then I began to understand what they were talking about. I wouldn't have known a spiritual principle if it ran me over in the parking lot. I mean, I had a central organizing principle in my life, and it went like this. If it gives me pleasure, do it some more. That's it. Some is good, more is better. That's drugs, alcohol, sex, money, whatever. I want more of what gives me pleasure, and damn all the rest of you. And my pleasure is all that matters. And my pain is all that matters. And you people are just sort of impediments to my journey. And the Greek philosophers call that hedonism. It's the pleasure principle. It's a life based on personal pleasure above all else. It's the heart of alcoholism and drug addiction. It's the quick fix. You know, I feel I'm having some bad feelings. I've had a bad day, so I'll take a drink. And the effect, it says that we drink because we like the effect produced by alcohol. The effect is real fast. I feel better. I feel better. You know, everything seems to be okay for a while. And the problem is that short circuit of life becomes the central process, the central, motif or modus operandi, or this focus of my existence is staying high. Permabuzz, right? I'm looking for permabuzz. Why detox when you can retox? I need a new drug. This one isn't working anymore. I'll try that one. You know, and I've tried all. I was a pharmaceutical test pilot. I crashed and burned many times, like most test pilots do. And that was the principle. So they're telling me about altruistic action. That's compassionate action. That's where I'm supposed to take time out of my busy schedule pleasuring myself to concern myself with somebody else and see if I can't do something for them, asking nothing in return. And I mean, you know, I'm not a stupid guy, but I just thought, well, that's just stupid, and nobody does that. Nobody ever does anything selflessly. Everybody always has a selfish motive to whatever they do. I used to believe that. And I said everybody, that's called a generalization. 6.5 billion people are all like that, because I was expanding from an example of one, because that was me. I had never done anything altruistically. Never. I always had a whiff of what's in it for me. And yes, ma'am, do you have a question?
I'm sorry. What is altruistic?
Okay. Altruism means that
A whiffum.
it's the opposite of a whiffum. You never heard of a whiffum?
I've never heard of a whiffum.
What's it? Altruism is a compassionate act that's done for the betterment of somebody else and gives me nothing. It's just pure goodness. Out of the goodness of my heart, you know, I'll let you cut in front of me on the freeway, you bastard. Except I have to do it without the "you bastard" part.
Yeah.
You know, and I just thought, I was a taker. I mean, that's what alcoholics are. I was selfish. I was a taker. It was all about me first. See? And the idea of spending any time actually trying to put somebody else first was, well, stupid. And I didn't think anybody ever did it. And I didn't want to do it. That's how come I ended up with 6 psychiatric institutions. And along the way, I picked up enough desire chips to shingle a doghouse. So, because I kept trying to have it my way and not drink and drug. And I found that sobriety was extraordinarily painful. See, so somebody asked me about a 12-step program and, an AA and whatever. I mean, I can't really tell you without giving you some history of my story. It's my experience of life has changed, because as a result of working these 12 steps, I have been changed from the inside out by a power I used to deny the existence of. I mean, you realize that in this society, this is a God-denying society. Now, we got a lot of people who go to church, so they're religious. But basically, they deny the existence and power of God. They keep it in a box. Or our political and cultural institutions just flat deny the existence of God. I mean, I was raised by a family of people who loved me, and they taught me that there was a God, and I should probably pay attention to that. But then I went to college, and they made a good little atheist out of me. That's what they do in college. They turn you into an atheist. See? So I was an atheist for a while. I had to give that up. It took too much faith to be an atheist. I had to believe in some truly ridiculous things, and it was extraordinarily painful to live that way. And see, that was the real problem. The book is right. Selfishness and self-centeredness is the problem. Once you take the drink and drug away from me, what's left was this viciously selfish, self-centered, arrogant, angry, and frightened little man who no longer had a defense mechanism against the war that life seemed to me to be. So it's either change or die. So they said, maybe we can unravel some of this rage and this resentment by doing this fourth step. I spent, well, there were some times there I spent $2 a minute that's a couple $100 an hour, with a therapist so I could lie to him because I didn't want him to think badly of me. And so then later on I said, well, he didn't help me. Well, you never told him the truth. How could he help you? And maybe I didn't even know the truth. I didn't even know the truth. I didn't think I was selfish. I thought I was right. I thought all these people around me really were jerks and dullards and fools or my enemies, and they had it in for me. And so it wasn't me, it was them. They needed a change, not me. This is the heart of this process, is I had to finally take responsibility for the position I found myself in, sitting in a room with no doorknobs, trying to convince myself that I was right and they were wrong. And they finally said, well, couldn't you have been wrong occasionally? Maybe, maybe your reactions were a bit extreme, maybe. And the big book talks about a way to escape the bondage of that never-ending wheel of resentment. I mean, the only way I got over one resentment was to just pick up a new one. I had to grind away on my hatred for my father, and then somebody would cut me off. Oh, I forget about my dad and start hating this guy, or hate the guy in the Hawaiian shirt who's leading the meeting. I'm going to kill that son of a bitch if I catch him in the parking lot, And then, of course, 5 minutes later in the same meeting, I'm going, oh, no, it's too tough. I'm going to kill myself. That'll be a good idea. Somebody once told me that spiritual progress for early sobriety is that when I move from suicide to homicide, that's spiritual progress. I had to think about that for a while, but I actually agree with it. Now, we can do something with the anger at somebody else. If you go off and kill yourself, well, there's not much we can do about that. So, and by the way, to drink is a form of suicide. So we have lots of desire chips for people who try that softer, easier way. So coming back to this, take your own inventory. Try to get a sense of what happened in your life and see if you can't find out some things about the things that you did wrong instead of what they did wrong, and why you did those things, and what the impact of you doing those things was. And that maybe I would come to find a new way of looking at that situation, and that would relieve me of the terrible anger. And I believe the big book is right. We do the third step prayer, we immediately launch out of this program of action designed to find out what it is that's blocking me. I mean, I know people who fervently believe in God and Jesus, but they are so angry, and they cannot stay sober until they actually do these steps, until they find out what's blocking me. And the answer right at the introduction to step 4 is resentment is the number one offender. Number one offender. From it flow all forms of spiritual disease. Now that's quite a statement. So it doesn't really matter how much I believe in Jesus. If my heart's full of hatred and anger and resentment, I have no contact with God, none whatsoever. It's just not there. And so I have to somehow cast this hatred and anger out of my heart. And one of the first things I learned was that really what anger is, it's fear turned outward. And I never thought I was afraid. I mean, I'm a man, right? Men we're not afraid. I was pissed off, but I wasn't afraid. I was terrified. But of course, it wasn't okay for me to admit that. Then I had to finally admit it. That these things that I was resentful about, these people, places, and things, had somehow threatened my sense of who I am and what I own. And as a result, I got angry. So first step, we start to look at the anger and try to unwind some of that, and then we see the fear underneath it. Again, this is self-searching, leveling of pride, confession of shortcomings. And the book says, big book says, almost none of us liked the self-searching, leveling of pride, and confession of shortcomings, which the process requires for its successful consummation. Well, I don't know anybody who really loved that process when they first got started with it. I now have become comfortable with it, and I realize that if I feel the anger, the agitation beginning to build up in me, that's just the ego of Morgan the Magnificent trying to come back into control. And now I know that. So it's never about them and what they did. It's about suddenly I've become angry. I'm frightened. I have to do something with that. So lo and behold, they gave me a prayer. It's on page 67. It's the anger prayer. God saved me from being angry. We try to understand rather than judge and hate. We find that many people are wrong much of the time, okay, but we try to see it in a different light. I ask God to help me see it. See, the God that I've come to trust and serve is a God of infinite love and understanding. And God loves us all exactly where we are, as we are, without fail. Now, that was a radical proposition. That God loves me in spite of everything I did. That God loves me in spite of everything I ever did. And so if I'm sitting here hating myself, well, I got to kill myself. Okay? And God loves me, well, one of us is wrong. Here's a confession of shortcomings. I'm wrong. God doesn't hate me. Imagine that. All these years I thought he hated me. I hated him. Somebody said, well, you know, God loves you not because you're good. God loves you because he's good and he can't help himself. So you're just going to have to take it. There it is. It's like, I mean, I couldn't accept it for the longest time because my worst resentment was against me. The worst of all possible resentment was self-hatred. I hated myself. And God kept beating the heart in his chest. The breath kept happening, you know. I don't know how to decarbonate the blood that keeps the brain alive. That just happens, you know. Air goes in, carbon dioxide comes out, the blood in the brain, the blood goes to the brain, refreshes the brain, keeps it alive. I, Morgan, do not know how to do that. I do not know how to beat the heart in this body. This idea that I'm in control of my life is ridiculous. It's ridiculous. It's the height of arrogance. And I began to see that. I began to realize, well, wait a minute, you know, that every heartbeat is proof of three things. It's proof of the existence of God. It's proof of the will of God. Every heartbeat is the will of God. And finally, it's proof of the love of God. My Lord, I can remember being, you know, coming to on bathroom floors and been on a 3 or 4 or 5 day run, and I'm just near death, and the heart keeps beating, and the hangover's awful. I can remember, you know, having a cocaine seizure in a restaurant parking lot down on 59, and begging this young lady I was with. She was a hooker for Foxy's escort service, and I had this cab driver living with me at the time. That's how I solved the drunk driving issue. I brought a cab driver home to live with me, and he used to run hookers for Foxy's escort service out of Sugar Land. Kid you not. So we would drive around. We'd take the hookers to their jobs, and then we would cruise around and do cocaine. One night we're riding around in the yellow cab, and I had a cocaine seizure. And I mean, my heart rate went up to 750 or something, and the vision went weird. I'm down on my knees, and I'm water. Give me a glass of water, please. And the girl and the cab driver are fighting with each other. The girl says, "We got to get out of here, man. This guy dies. The cops are going to put us all in jail." And the cab driver, who's a quote friend of mine, says, "Well, now wait a minute, because remember he's living with me, so he really does have to deliver me home a lot." And so they argued over it. And then finally they went and got me a glass of water. And I got over it. 5, 10, 15, 20 minutes later, I'm back in the cab doing cocaine off the glove box door. Now, God had a lot of patience with me. God had a lot of patience with me. Okay? I had to do this work in order to understand that I had lived a lie, a complete lie. I was a liar, the father of all lies. It was all bullshit. And I didn't want to accept that. Nobody does. This idea that basically our troubles are our own making and they rose out of me, and I'm an extreme example of self-will run riot, though I don't think so. That's on page 62. I didn't want to accept that. Today I accept that. And I accept that. And life is wonderful. It's spectacular. But this is the process that it takes to get over ourselves. You know, you ever hear the line, well, get over yourself. That's what we're here to do. We're here to survive our own personalities. And if you're lucky, you may survive your own personality. You may grow into a totally different person for whom altruistic action and love and kindness and goodwill are part of our nature, part of your nature, as opposed to anger, fear, guilt, shame, and all the other craziness that goes with it that makes sobriety so painful that I've got to go back to drinking and drugging because sobriety hurts even worse. I've got to do something about the sober condition or I will drink again. That's the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. So, In a nutshell, that's what I can say to a guy.
Awesome.